Dan and I talked a lot about how you can deploy SocialBridge to really keep yourselves agile and at the forefront of what's happening. But it is great to hear it from another agency and see how they're doing that, and that's precisely what we'll do today. I have with me Raj Choudhury from Engauge. They're one of our wonderful agency SocialBridge customers. And I'll give you a bit of background, and then Raj will take it away, talking about the premise of their engagement and how they use us. And then a little bit of Q&A with Raj and I. I do encourage you, though, if you do have questions or things that you'd like to learn from him and apply to your own agency, be thinking of those questions, and we'll definitely open it up at the end for any of that Q&A from you guys. So Engauge, interesting use case, founded in 2007 from the acquisition of 3 agencies: a traditional agency, a digital agency, and a direct marketing agency. So they came together with that pedigree for the latest and greatest and being able to stay on the forefront of things. They're full service, about 275 employees across 4 offices domestically and even in China, headquartered out of Atlanta. They've got a great pedigree for digital and social, along with traditional, and they really spread that across a great listing of clients. They're the social marketing agency of record for MyCoke Rewards, as well as the social media and mobile AOR for Chick-fil-A. And they've done wonderful work for Coke's 125th anniversary, Cisco, the nationwide NASCAR series, even Outback Steakhouse's million steak giveaway. So they're doing great work, but the thing I really want to highlight is they're providing great thought leadership. This is a snapshot from their website, and they have this Engauge Insights section where they give you the skinny on things like Google+, Instagram, what's going to happen in mobile marketing, the kind of resources that we talked about in the last presentation. They put together reports and they put that out there, and it's a great place. I recommend it to anyone in the space looking to stay current. They're doing a great job with that. So with that little bit of background, I will hand it over to Raj, and he'll talk about their SocialBridge story.
Great, thanks, Darren.
It's just advancing there.
Perfect. So, ask questions actually a little bit during the session as I go through some of these slides if something makes sense or not. But I want to give you kind of a brief in how we even came to be, how we brought Central Desktop into the fold, and really what our challenges were coming into it. So, as Darren mentioned, Engauge was formed through an acquisition of 3 agencies, 3 very different disciplines in that sense: a direct agency, a traditional agency, and a digital agency. And if you guys have gone through acquisitions of agencies or have gone through mergers of agencies, you'll know the challenges that exist, certainly by combining 2 like disciplined agencies, but when you're combining 3 agencies with very different workflows, different methodologies, different systems, and so forth, it can be quite the challenge. So my challenge was specifically trying to take 3 very different agencies and make them into one agency that operated across multiple locations with various disciplines, and remove the silos that existed. So it's essentially ripping apart 3 agencies and rebuilding them as one. And with that comes the challenges of systems and processes that existed in the legacy elements. So the digital agencies had, the digital elements had, PM structures that were in place, but the traditional didn't. The direct agency had very good elements within, direct marketing and database marketing and so forth, but those are foreign concepts to the traditional side of the business. Okay, so with that came, different financial tools, different collaboration tools, different workflow management tools, and so forth. So when I started looking at it, I started looking at all the various point solutions that Engauge was using. We were using Yammer, we were using Ning, we were using FTP, secure FTP, we were using Basecamp and SharePoint. But those were all being used either from a specific department, in the sense that the creative team would come up with what they wanted to use, and that's all they were going to use. And not only that, but the creative team inside of the old traditional element were using something, the creative team inside of the digital element was using something else, and the creative team inside of the direct agency was using something else. Right? So there was a level of inefficiency that definitely existed. There was a level of data that really wasn't being collaborated in any sense. And most painfully enough, the net result was that it was very hard to try and get really the best product for a client, especially when you're trying to infuse the work across disciplines and across work. So we came across Central Desktop after speaking to another agency, actually, who were implementing them from a client extranet, and we were using Basecamp primarily for that. And so we started looking at the solution, and we were like, well, okay, we're going to be overhauling everything. And what we found in general is that it was actually easier for us to set aside everything we were using already today and just go for a brand new solution and re-engineer everything instead of going in and re-engineering SharePoint to work with the rest of the organization. It was actually just far better just to rip that whole Band-Aid, in fact, pull probably 8 or 9 different Band-Aids off and just build up from the ground up. I mean, the net results, basically, as I mentioned, we consolidated down to a handful of agency systems, which is huge. Overall, it kind of reduced down the overall cost of all the various solutions in there. But more importantly, it reduced down the amount of effort we were putting on a day-to-day basis, not only from my IT team, but also just from my general operations team, my finance team, and so forth. As I mentioned, implementing something new as opposed to re-engineering an existing solution allowed us to just completely re-engineer our processes and mechanisms, which is what I had to do regardless. This was just a mechanism for me to try and push that through. And then we obviously were able to simplify our onboarding and training quite dramatically, not only with existing employees, but net new employees, in the sense that I was only having to train in one solution versus so many different point solutions. So that was an incredible savings as well. And then obviously replicating data, right? Which is the continuing challenge. Which data set is correct? Which is the most recent capabilities deck out there? Where do you have it? Is it stuck in someone's Dropbox, or is it on someone's hard drive, and so forth? So we were able to try and eliminate those levels of disparities in data. And then ultimately, I mean, my overall goal of my agency, my job for my CEO and my board was basically make Engauge an easier place to work, and that's it. So that was my starting mission, was that take these 3 agencies and make it an easy place to work. And so I really think that the Central Desktop solution, as well as the other solutions I put in play, were very helpful in doing so, and it will obviously continue to progress.
Can you explain the integration between Central Desktop and NetSuite?
Yeah, right now there isn't, actually. There isn't a strong tie-in together. We just completed our Central Desktop and NetSuite, our NetSuite and OpenAir implementation, so we haven't actually gone down the paths of integrating. We're very curious about the new API additions you guys put into place that may help us. When we initiate a client, it's already going to be inside of NetSuite. That initiates the project into OpenAir, and we'd like it in conjunction to initiate a workspace in Central Desktop. Same thing with the contacts, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we'll run through a few questions that I have for Raj, but at the same time, if you guys have questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll take them as we go. Before we get started, are any other pending questions? Okay.
Actually, real quick.
Yeah.
So your intranet, what's that based on? That's based on Central Desktop?
It is now, yeah. It was SharePoint, and our original implementation of SharePoint went fairly well. The only problem was that we couldn't adapt it fast enough. It was hard to get internal resources to put against it, so it was almost an overkill solution in the end. We really hoped that SharePoint would have been the right solution. We actually implement SharePoint for our clients. It was just more of a nightmare to try and get internal resources dedicated to it, to develop the templates, to develop the content, as things were changing so fast with our agency, SharePoint was really staying behind. And so the workspace was actually able to accomplish most of the elements, not everything. But again, my goal wasn't to get the best point solution in every aspect from Central Desktop. It's to basically get as good as I can get and have a central kind of SSO model, security model around it.
And this was your own thought, or was this something you saw based off of another Central Desktop model for creating an intranet off of it?
No, no. The initial thing I ever saw out of Central Desktop was actually through another agency where they were just using it from a client extranet side of things. And so that was very similar to what we were doing with Basecamp. And so as I started digging deep into it, they were actually showing me, once I got into the sales cycle of Central Desktop, they were showing me intranets, but not necessarily for agencies, for other verticals that they service. So I didn't think there was a good reason why we couldn't do that.
Perfect answer, thank you.
Yeah.
And coming from the union of three agencies, can you talk a bit about how, in creating the hub, how that's had an impact? I would think a positive impact on your overall collaborative culture and kind of the working dynamics within your internal teams.
Yeah, the hub has been a great element in the sense that it speaks to the entire agency as opposed to speaking to the legacy elements that existed, right? In addition to that, it's extremely easy for them to go in there and add content and edit content. We had certainly collaboration systems in play before. We were using Wikimedia, for instance, right, which are great for the developers. And if you've used Wikimedia before, you know that you need to know the tags that are involved within them, right? So they work great for folks in technology services and maybe a UX team. But you have a print designer or a client partner, account leader in there, and they get lost within that system, right? So the hub became a very easy place to add content, much easier than Wikimedia. And so we also concentrated specific teams to take ownership of different content areas. And so in general, instead of people in various offices not really understanding, what does a front-end developer do compared to a Java developer, right? Or what is really the premise of an art director and copywriter pairing, right? It allowed us to build out that content in a very fast manner, and allowed that collaboration to actually happen, and allowed that content sharing to exist and learnings of an agency, as opposed to my marketing department trying to send something out, my account team trying to send something out agency-wide via email, all those various aspects. My PM team trying to make sure that folks understand what PMs do and so forth. So it became an easy point for everyone to understand and shape the way they want it. Yeah.
And did you? I know different teams had different adjustment periods. Did you find any interesting insights as different groups were coming along and kind of their onboarding with SocialBridge and the platform in general?
Yeah. So ironically, the initial intent was on the client extranet side of things, and as you can see, we've deployed it really to solve a lot of different solutions. In the end, we actually deployed out the hub first, because really nothing like that existed outside of a SharePoint implementation that was very loose, with not that great content, if you will. So once that was deployed, the interesting aspect was that I didn't expect something like the Dropbox workspace to be used that much, and that was used a lot, by various team members, just sharing files and so forth. We had various solutions in place before, but I didn't realize the level of activity in sharing documents that would occur as a result of Central Desktop. So that was a huge element. And then the other surprising element was that even if we had all these various point solutions. The reality was that we found out that when we actually went to speak about Central Desktop and all the various features, a lot of people didn't even know Yammer existed, right, in the agency. I was shocked. I was like, you really don't know Yammer exists? You know, they were just, you know, dead to those features that came out at some point. You know, they were championed by a department or a specific office, and they just didn't pay attention. So when I was actually deploying out this solution, I'd say it's just like this, and you've been using this, and I go to a specific office or a specific department, they're like, we've never seen that before. You know, we didn't even know that existed. Yeah. So the adoption rate was dramatically far greater than I expected, because I was pushing out solutions that, yes, the agency in theory had, but these guys didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Curious just came to mind. Did you notice, not regional things, but in deploying across different offices and your network of offices, were there differences in Atlanta where you're based versus Columbus and Pittsburgh, or did the cloud effect really standardize everybody and the process was kind of seamless?
Yeah, what I try to do is when we were implementing, we had basically almost champions coming out of every office. So so it wasn't just like Raj is based out of Atlanta, so this is an Atlanta thing.
Gotcha.
Kind of thing, right? So that helped quite a bit in the sense that you had champions in the other offices, and my role is I'm on the road quite a bit in all of the other offices, so I'm constantly trying to push those kind of elements in the sense of how could you use this and so forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that how you control comments? Because it's like Facebook, so it's like comments can get out of control, and you have a second person in a group controlling that.
No, not really. We try not to control the comments.
No, I mean what I'm saying is in non-essential comments don't really necessary for the project or whatever. There's a person that controls that, and it's like, well, that's not essential, you can get rid of it.
There isn't. To be honest, if it's client related, we're focusing the conversation in a client workspace. If it's agency related, it's in an internal workspace. If it's department related, it's focused into a department workspace. So it's relevant at some point. If someone comments and it's out of place in a workspace, I don't think anyone pays attention to it.
Right.
Hopefully.
Well, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you've been on Facebook, it's comments, and then pretty soon you're going through 50 different things maybe not essential for the project. I don't know if there's just somebody
I mean, within each of the client workspaces, there's certainly the workspace admin, which is typically either the AM or the PM within that, and I guess they do control that to some extent, but there's no formalized cadence around that, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So no moderator kind of.
No moderator, no.
Okay.
No.
I know we've talked in the past about the Dropbox-like functionality. Were there any other kind of unexpected gains that you saw that came out of it? That the premise was A, but once implemented, B really surprised you.
I think Dropbox was one of the most liked features.
Yeah.
I was surprised that proofing really wasn't used as much as I thought it would be, because it's an extremely powerful tool.
Do you know why that was? Why you needed it?
I think people still just prefer printing out comps and marking them up to some degree. I think it can be used when you're doing some proofing with, some comp approvals with clients who are used to things like that. But there's just a certain element that certain creative teams, certain AMs, PMs, and so forth, just physically, there's a premise, there's a notion here that I want to make sure that I also share, in the sense that my philosophy is always that tools are mechanisms to try and do something, but they're not the end-all solution. I actually advocate, although I'm a guy who implements systems for companies, if that makes sense, I advocate someone getting off the butt and speak to someone, right? yes, there's IM, there's central desktop, there's all these various systems, but there's never a, you gain so much more from physical interaction. So even when I was implementing this, and prior to kind of, breaking things apart and bringing them back together, the other element, we were moving resources between offices quite a bit, physically moving them. There's that physical element that drives collaboration, and then systems really just help spawn that through. But I'm a firm believer in get off your ass and speak to someone. Don't just IM them or email them. I don't want to see a 2-line email when you could just come over and ask me something. Yeah.
And how do the offices break down? Do you separate them by functionality at all, or?
No.
Okay.
We've tried many different models, and we're in our third model right now, which is it's a team-based model, so cross disciplines within a team. So a team exists with anywhere from say 15 to 25 resources, and they have a book of business that they run, they grow, they learn, they push. Those teams are made up of account folks, PMs, creatives, UX folks, print designers, event guys, you name it. Outside of the teams are the department heads. So we move the department heads completely outside of the team. So the department heads, their job is to ensure that consistency occurs between every single team. And we operate 9 teams across the offices. In some cases, a team may have folks from various offices as part of it. We try and tailor the types of resources into a team that makes the best sense for the best quality of work that's going to come out, in essence. So it's we try to, as much as possible, this isn't a Atlanta agency or Columbus agency. This isn't just the creative group or the technology group. This is a team, and yes, you have progression as a developer to the next stages or as a designer. By you being inside of the Atlanta office or the Columbus office doesn't mean that you have a benefit over someone else.
Gotcha. How do you see the culture of collaboration kind of informing the agency's path going forward? I know you coming out of the union of 3 agencies, there was probably a collaborative culture in place to an extent. And how does the evolution of that with SocialBridge in place and just with your own pedigree look forward from a technological and cultural infrastructure and how your teams work together? How do you kind of model that out, and what do you see for Engauge?
Yeah, so we're firm believers in thought leadership and ideas, right? And ideas hopefully spawn more ideas and ways to collaborate. The only method for us to really create ideas, in a sense, is through collaboration, right? We form very similar aspects in the sense that an idea comes from anyone, right? The system AE to the chief creative officer to whoever it may be. So collaboration has always been a critical component of all of the legacy agencies. So that's something that luckily we didn't have to kind of recreate in a sense. However, collaboration from multiple locations has been something we've had to enable in essence. So we have specific groups in the agency that take a lot of content and distill it down into thought leadership type work, or something we call fodder, which is just daily kind of tidbits on something that's cool, maybe 3D building projectors, or maybe some robotic stuff that's happening, and we try and spawn that through information that's vitable inside of the hub, in essence, so the agency can see that, and then everyone can kind of talk about it a little bit. That doesn't mean that it's the only method of collaboration or even ideation. We also have events in the office, or events across the agency, or we stream things across all locations to try and infuse that level of collaboration.
Okay, so it's really that cumulative effect.
Yeah, I think you have to do many different things. You can't just do one.
Yeah. We spoke a little bit about T-shaped talent. you're an agency that has a lot of that. Do you foresee, or have you already realized benefits in attracting more of that caliber of worker? And can you talk a bit about how you sell your process and culture to both prospective employees and clients?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the recruiting and retention side of any agency is extremely challenging, especially agencies that are having to gear up their social iOS or technology services quite a bit. You know, even analysts. I think I was mentioning, I was having a conversation with someone who's like insane to try and get a good analyst that knows, you know, Site Catalyst and Google Analytics these days, because they're in high demand, right? Social listening and things like that. So for us, it's, you know, we're competing not only with other agencies, but we're competing with product companies, you know, Google, Red Hat, so forth, you know, Microsoft, and then more and more over the last several years, we're competing against our clients. Our clients are building, you know, divisions within themselves that are comparable to any agency. You know, a lot of our clients at agencies are ex-agency guys, right? You can't necessarily bullshit like you did maybe 10 years ago. They're all the same. You know, we all come from the same place. So for us, it's creating really a cultural aspect. You know, we're hopefully creating an environment that's, one, easy for them to work in, and two, it's fun. Yeah, and we're able to go in and bring in the type of clients that they want to be working, the variety of clients, and so forth. Right? So we combat obviously working on a client because it's going to be somewhat the same against a product, right? And you know, if anything, I'd say that we try and bring, you know, some of the Mad Men era stuff to light. You know, fun work environments, a lot of booze helps.
Yeah, a lot of booze always helps.
Yeah, things like that. But it is a constant challenge. I mean, it's very, very hard to compete in a retention standpoint. Once you have a great creative team or a great technology team to try and retain those guys against what else is happening out there. But you can do it through cultural elements. We do a lot of wellness things, events, and we can yoga classes and things like that, or skydiving and things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we kind of touched on this a little earlier. I'm curious to get your opinion. Systems and interruptions are, you know, killers to the creative process. Curious to hear how, or if SocialBridge has really, with tools that make creative input into, you know, a system more seamless, do you see your creative folks adopting with that or not? It sounds more like not. And if not, do you foresee a happy medium where you can still have that person-to-person collaboration, which I would agree is necessary, but that there is also a technological aspect to that aids and improves that collaboration? Is there a tipping point somewhere in your eye?
You know, creative teams in general can be a challenge, just really how you present it into them. And I wouldn't say it's just even creative teams. It can be, you know, even our event teams and so forth. So I think if you think about what you're trying to achieve with the mechanism, the process, and set that aside, right? This is really what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to make sure that the quality is this, and by doing that we need these steps in place, right? We can make this a little faster if you use this method or this mechanism, this tool, or you could do it this way. So I think if you force someone to use only one method, you get that pushback, especially when they're very used to doing something else. Now, at some point you have to make the hard decisions and say, listen, I know you were doing it like this, but let me show you why this is so much better, right? Or even if you do it like that, but the net result is I need this checked off, this checked off, this checked off, and it needs to look like this in the end.
Right.
Here's a mechanism that you can use in the tool, or here's the other method you were using. You tell me which one's best.
Right.
Kind of thing.
I think that's good advice. So we talked a bit about kind of your agency, but want to hear a little bit about clients as well. Maybe I'll skip to the second one. Working with Delhaize, client that has many brands underneath it. and then Chick-fil-A, which is more of a single entity. Curious to hear a bit about how those engagements differ for you guys and what you see in each, what you've learned.
Yeah. So Del Hayes has various grocery brands, Food Lion, and Bond and Harvey's, and so forth. And so the interesting thing is, and Mark's here, who runs our PMO practice, but is very familiar with this client, and they were one of our testbed clients in rolling out SocialBridge with them. What was surprising was that they wanted to use our solution, in essence, to really create a marketing calendar overall, which is, we saw that with, say, mid-level organizations, not so much with enterprise-level organizations. So Central Desktop was a huge benefit for them. They could actually consolidate everything through. We're the digital agency of record for Del Hayes. We don't do the traditional direct or install for them, yet they were using our workspace to house everything. On the flip side, Chick-fil-A, which is a very innovative technology company, surprisingly. I mean, you may think of Chick-fil-A as maybe not as, it's a restaurant, so QSR side of things, how innovative they're going to be, but they're actually very, very innovative. So they have a lot of agencies that are pushing the boundaries. And so, this is a norm, in a sense, for them. For us to have something like Central Desktop is a norm. It's a given, right? As opposed to Del Hayes, which is like, oh my God, this is unbelievable,
right?
kind of thing.
Right.
So it varies. When we're working with larger brands, UPS, Cisco, and Coke and so forth, they are surprised in this solution because some of the ease of use on it versus some agencies where they've deployed out SharePoint for those same purposes. So it really does vary, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find that with some of the larger enterprises, they are in the throes of dealing with the kind of where you came from, where people will use point solutions and might have a mandated one system, but everyone kind of splinters off and
it's even within a large organization, even if they mandate their own solution, within one division to another in the same company, they'll use different point solutions.
Right.
It becomes a challenge. It becomes a challenge for our team to try and keep everything in sync. But I remember the guy from Sesame Street saying he wants to own the data. He's absolutely right. It's his information ultimately.
Yeah.
So it does become a challenge in having to use different point solutions for those different things, regardless if we're using their Basecamp or their SharePoint or wherever it may be, or a Primo or something like that. We'll still create a workspace, not only for our team, and I still expose the client to it and say, listen, it's going to be a bit of a replication here, but
right.
I bet you're going to find that our meetings are easily known, right, or the files are easily known,
right.
or if you really do want to send this to a vendor, it's fairly easy. You don't have to jump through hoops and so forth.
Right. Okay. What has been your overall experience with client inclusion? I know a lot of times from an agency standpoint, you can see hesitation, that idea of bringing them too close to getting behind the curtain. Have you seen it lead to more productivity on accounts and campaigns?
Mm-hmm.
Has it hindered? And how do you kind of moderate how much inclusion and how far? How do you balance that?
Yeah. Our organization in general are big kind of agile believers, and so inclusion of a client, regardless of the type, and by agile I'm taking from a general standpoint, it doesn't have to be a technology implementation. It can be a 30-second spot we're doing with a client, and we want to keep them as inclusive as possible. There's obviously an art to it. You do want to surprise with ideas now and then, so you've got to be somewhat careful on what you do expose out. So we try to balance what the team is learning
mm-hmm.
about the client and the industry to be shared with the client. So
right.
the latest feeds on, you know, on social in a specific vertical, we want the client to be as educated as us. It's whether they have the time to really consume that data, right? So we never want to try and have a hidden curtain around that. We want to spawn ideas, right? But we don't necessarily always want to throw out all of ideas to the client. So we'll kind of bring that behind the curtain a little bit. Yeah, things like that. So I mean, it's a balance point. There's some general things that you know. I think if you can get the client to buy in and be part of your team, you know, and you part of their team, you're in a win-win situation. You know, if you're playing cloak and daggers too much, then it can backfire on you ultimately.
We have a few minutes left. I'd like to open it up. I know you guys have been offering up any questions you have while we're going. Any other questions at this time? Okay, I think I have one more on here. Just in terms of client satisfaction, and have there been any rave reviews and clients? I know Delhaize at first. You know, I don't know if they're one of the clients you had kind of beta tested with.
They were, yeah.
Yeah.
They're one of our betas, yeah. They absolutely love it.
And how did you go through that decision, to slowly roll it out before really jumping in?
Based on which teams we felt were more ready. Okay. In essence, which teams already had pretty well organized Basecamp implementations or Jira implementations or whatever it may be. So whoever was the more organized, we took them and said, okay, recreate this, or define out what that was. And that was really also a method to try and develop our templates as well. So before we tried to beta it out with 5 or 6 clients, and that changed our ideas on our templates. And we're probably in the sense of coming back now, 6-7 months past implementation to kind of revisit everything again and say, well, all right, what's really working now and what's not. So there are some champions in the sense that, again, I always feel like the mid-sized clients for us seem to get a lot more of a benefit out of it. Larger clients typically just still don't want to log into something. They want the account director to distill it over a phone call or something.
Interesting. Okay. Yes.
Are you guys on like one server? Because like, what happens if your server goes down? You're like completely shut down, right? Like if this is on a server, this is like server based, right? I mean, aren't you on a server? So if your IT says, oh, we're gonna like upgrade our servers, we got to take up the servers.
SocialBridge is like cloud based.
Oh,
There's no install. It doesn't live on premise.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, we moved. We were using Paris EAS as our main kind of financial system and job management system prior, which was an install solution.
So there'd never be like any outages at all?
No. There were outages.
Okay.
Yeah. So my overall strategy was to, when we were consolidating, was also move everything into the cloud.
Okay.
Yeah. So NetSuite's on the cloud, OpenAIR's on the cloud, Central Desktop's on the cloud. There's really no solutions I have in-house anymore. Okay. Even hosting with clients, we use Amazon pretty much for everything. So it's cut down beneath that.
Are you talking about Jira a little bit? Are you guys still using Jira from a development perspective?
We are for one or two of our clients that are a lot more agile driven. So the challenge being is that most, even an OpenAIR system or project and so forth just don't deal with agile in a very good manner, sprint planning and so forth. So we use Jira a little bit, we use Xplan a little bit. But we have to still replicate the high-level tasks from a time entry standpoint into OpenAIR.
Do you use Central Desktop at all with these agile clients, or have you set up a job that way with using sprints instead of doing the waterfall?
We don't use Central Desktop in any way for project management.
Okay, so only your OpenAIR.
Yeah. The only exception to that is on the BD side of things, where frankly you're trying to move the tasks through very fast, and they don't need to have a long project plan around them or anything like that. So we can quickly task, I need these 5 slides in this deck. We may use that a little bit, but to be honest, from a BD standpoint, they're moving, in 1 week or 2 week cycles extremely fast. So it's actually more efficient to do it a little bit inside a central desktop than it is in open air. But we still record the time and the project, the BD project, in open air, so we can track against our efforts.
So if you're not using it for project management, are you guys using it for like studio and pre-press as well, at all?
No.
No.
I think just to speak to the project management side, the niche that does work really well for us, because we're in a little bit of a unique situation because we have OpenAir, which is a project management software tool, and it has really robust functionality from integrating Microsoft project plans to resource management. So we're not trying to have 2 systems doing the same thing, but where Central Desktop plays really nicely is on the task collaboration side of things. So my project managers have to use OpenAir to do their project planning and put in task assignments for timesheet entry. What OpenAir doesn't do a very good job is once you have the collaborator run a system of tasks, particularly on quick turn things like maintenance things that happen on a weekly basis, like we talked about Engauge, which is a client that we do a ton of daily and weekly updates for. We're using Central Desktop to do a lot of that task collaboration within the Central Desktop versus doing it in OpenAir, which does have capabilities.
Yeah, that's another interesting point. We also use the client workspace to initiate client requests, so via the workflows, but not necessarily to task those out, but to take in the inbound request and maintenance level stuff. So then the project managers can basically execute against those.
Is that using the bug tracker or the workflow?
Using the workflow, so just simple forms, and then just some workflows behind that to notify. Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that wraps it up. Thank you again, Raj, and thank you all.